Well, first of all, let me just express my very, very warm appreciation to the club. Let me also say that, look, the FCC and by extension the work that you do as journalists is something very important for us here in India as Canada, but also in Canada as a whole. You interpret global developments, the type of information that you bring forward is very, very important. And in disseminating that to consumers, to people, to not only here in India, but around the world. And I just wanted to sort of articulate that it's something that we don't underestimate, a very critical role that you play. And so when it comes to interacting with the media and journalists, and our Prime Minister has made this very clear since he's been elected over the last year or several months, we do welcome this opportunity, and I always look at relationships with journalists as something that can be very collaborative and win-win. And so from that perspective, when this invitation came up, it was something that we felt, yes, this is something that we want to do, and I think you'll know that we accepted it immediately. But sometimes I am a little bit concerned about what may be published the next day or what that headline is, so we'll just have to wait and see which of my comments may have been taken slightly out of context, if any, but we'll just look forward to raising that with you next time, given that I'm actually a member here now. I feel I can do that. So what I want to do, I wanted to cover up three sort of areas. I wanted simply to articulate a few brief remarks about Canada's government. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is very, very well known around the world and highly regarded. And I would say in that regard, there are very similarities with Prime Minister Modi, who's also well known and highly regarded around the world as well. I also wanted to articulate a few comments about the current state of play of the Canada-India relationship, because there's a lot of information there that I wanted to share that's not widely or well known, and I think we need to take advantage of opportunities to showcase Canada and what we're doing here in India or with India. And so I want to do a little bit of that. But then more importantly, I wanted to finally focus a little bit, just provide a few reflections on areas of importance, focus, some of our priorities, where we're going as a government, but also by extension here in India as well. So let me just continue on and say, look, our government under Prime Minister Trudeau was elected in October 2015. It was a very significant electoral change. It was the first time, not only in Canadian history, but possibly in the Commonwealth. This is not confirmed, but that a third place party, so not the opposition party, went and won an outright majority. It was a very significant election win. Our Prime Minister has made it very clear and talked a little bit about various facets of how he would govern before he became Prime Minister. And when you look at the results of our election, 28% of the seats in our House of Commons were comprised of women, and half of Prime Minister Trudeau's cabinet are women, and he made a point of mentioning that he would do that, 15 of 30 cabinet ministers. We have a very strong cabinet. 10 members of Parliament of Aboriginal or First Nations origin have been elected, and many different faiths and communities reflecting Canada's diversity have been elected to Parliament. Representation of Canadians of Indian origin is something that many of you have heard about. 19 members of Parliament of Indian origin, of which 17 are in the government caucus. The previous highest number was 10 in any given year, and I think it's 2 or 3 elections ago. So just to give you an idea, that's almost double what we've ever had. And 4 members of cabinet who are of Indian origin. So when you have 30 cabinet ministers, more than 10% of our cabinet is actually of Indian origin. So it just gives you an idea of the diversity and some of the impacts that you can think about when your cabinet and your parliamentary caucus is informed around multiple issues, including those that leverage diversity. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So this was very important, that commitment to reflect the diversity of Canada. A few other things. Our government has made it very clear that transparent government will be very, very important. For the first time ever, mandate letters from the Prime Minister, cabinet ministers have been made public and have been published on the Prime Minister's website. And I should mention if you look at some of those mandate letters, a number of them mention India as a very, very specific priority. Our international trade minister, our foreign minister, our agriculture minister. Prime Minister Trudeau has come out himself and said that there's a significant priority placed on the Canada-India relationship, and I think that's noteworthy. So let me then talk a little bit about the Canada-India relationship, building on that as a little bit of a segue. So, our relationship is very strong, diverse, it's long-standing. But I would say that, this is my view, that our relationship right now is very robust, and I would argue is at the strongest point that it has ever been and continuing to grow stronger. Prime Minister Modi visited Canada last year. It was the first standalone visit by an Indian Prime Minister in over 42 years. That in itself was significant. At that time, he did meet with Justin Trudeau before he was Prime Minister, and that was a very good meeting. They got along quite well. More recently, in April of this year, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Trudeau met on the margins, formally in a bilateral, on the margins of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. And that was a really good opportunity to discuss the state of the relationship. And at that time, Prime Minister Modi extended an invitation to Prime Minister Trudeau to visit India. That invitation was accepted. And right now, a date has not yet been set. The challenge is simply scheduling and nothing else. I'm working with both Prime Minister's offices to try to secure a window or a set of dates that work for both, and given multilateral meetings and other bilateral schedule challenges, that's the only reason why we haven't firmed something out. But we're certainly highly anticipating that visit to happen in the not too distant future. And when it does, I know that it'll be very, very well received here in India and in Canada as well. And, investment between Canada and India, official stats were around the $5 billion mark, which is not that high, but it was largely skewed in favor of Indian investment in Canada, with about 100 Indian companies invested in Canada. Over the last year alone, that has completely gone the other way. There's been an approximately 400% increase in 1 year of Canadian investment into India. And that's very significant. The total stock of Canadian investment in India, these are not official numbers, because our official numbers are not recent and they don't factor in portfolio investments and other factors, but we estimate around $12 billion, which is very significant of Canadian investment, largely institutional investors, pension funds. So things are moving in a very significant direction along those lines. And of course, just like India, Canada also plays a big premium on welcoming foreign investment, given we have a very stable financial system, economic strength, low operating costs. This is where my marketing comes in. I have to do this because it's on the record. So lowest corporate tax environment in the G7 and among the lowest in the G20, a highly educated and competitive workforce, R&D incentives, and something that we don't always pay enough attention to is access to the entire North American market through the North America Free Trade Agreement. This is a marketplace of $500 million and about a $20 trillion worth of economic output. If you do business, if an Indian company does business in Canada, it has free trade access to all of North America. If you look at simply travelers and visa applications for tourism or friends and family or business traffic, so far, year to date alone, about 39% increase. If you look at students studying from India to Canada, study permits have gone up 70% in the last year alone. So I'm trying to illustrate that these are some big numbers, and it just showcases how strong that relationship is. But all the trend lines are pointing that this will continue. And finally, just to remind folks that may not be aware, or for those that may be aware, but just a reminder, Air Canada launched a nonstop flight from Toronto to Delhi within the last year. That flight is doing extremely well, to a point where they're expanding it to a daily service in October. But they're also launching a nonstop flight from Vancouver to Delhi in October as well, showing how robust the two-way traffic is between Canada and India. And then, of course, you've got the 1.3 million Canadians of Indian origin, which is the largest on a per capita basis of any Indian diaspora population around the world. So there's a lot happening there that can be somewhat understated, but I think has a lot to build on in terms of ongoing momentum. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor for the state of the relationship now. So just switching gears, and what I wanted to focus on a little bit more is what are some of our priorities and areas of focus as a government, but also how they may relate to the India relationship or what we're doing here in India. And I picked a few areas, and I'll touch on these, and again, I'm happy to engage further in some questions, and not in any particular order. Multilateralism is very significant cornerstone of our foreign policy going forward. Our foreign minister has made that very clear. Our prime minister has made that very clear to sort of renew our collaboration in multilateral fora. Of course, with many countries around the world, including India. We're now the 10th largest contributor to the UN's regular budget, which is pretty significant. And then various other UN missions we contribute in great amounts. This is very, very significant for us, a return to peacekeeping, a return to contributing to inclusive governance, human rights issues around the world, development, international peace and security. But most importantly, what I wanted to convey is Canada announced a few months ago its candidacy for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council for the 21-22 year, and the voting will take place in a year before then. And so we're very much out there trying to showcase what Canada has to offer, and we're looking forward to receiving, hopefully, India's support among other countries around the world as well. Another area, moving on, is climate change and clean energy. This is, of course, a top priority for our government. We played a very significant role at the Paris conference. It was one of the first acts of our new government after they were elected, recognizing that this is a very significant, pressing challenge around the world. And so we're very proud to be involved in that, and having been part of concluding the Paris Agreement. And together with India and other partners around the world, we've agreed to various commitments. You know what they are, as I'm sure you've written about them. But we've also made some other announcements, like a $2.65 billion fund over the next 5 years to help developing countries tackle climate change. We've also committed to ratifying the Paris Agreement before the end of this calendar year, and we're certainly hoping that other countries, including India, will do the same. We're also working at looking at technology, ways in which we can stimulate innovation, green growth, resource efficiencies, and new investments in infrastructure that's green and clean and renewable technology. We also have a fair bit going on around solar, wind energy, where we have a lot of capacity, and there's quite a bit happening here on the ground in India as well. The third area, again, this is not in any order, is gender equality and a focus on women and girls. This is something that is absolutely critical for our government, and it's something that we value significantly in terms of our programs. The protection and advancement of women's human rights in multilateral fora has been a long-standing feature of our foreign policy, and that continues to be the case now. Addressing economic empowerment of women has also been a very central feature of our development assistance, and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. We've had a focus on addressing the problem of child early and forced marriage. This was included in the post-2015 development agenda, as some of you may know. And we focus heavily on leading the campaign for October 11th as the International Day of the Girl Child, where we will have a number of events and opportunities to showcase our focus in that area, not only here in Delhi, but other parts of India as well. So through various actions, projects, initiatives, we see quite a bit of opportunity for collaboration on this and other social development issues, and we'll continue to place a priority on that as well. The fourth area is defense and security cooperation. One thing that I talk about is, we focused a fair bit on trade and investment with the Canada-India relationship, and we won't take our foot off the gas pedal there. We'll keep doing that. But we're certainly trying to ramp up other areas of the relationship that haven't been as front and center for us in the past. So defense relations, defense technology, defense trade is something that we have a significant ecosystem of capacity and technology. How do we sort of work together to bring that to the fray here? So for example, we did sign an MOU with DRDO around defense research that is something between our research agencies which has the potential to generate some interesting results. We look at training exercises, cold climate warfare, capacity, peacekeeping collaboration, among other areas beyond trade as well. On the security front, our national security agencies collaborate. We have similar interests around regional stability, regional security. We have concerns around foreign fighters, around issues of extremism and terrorism, and we collaborate at the national security level, national security advisor level. We have a joint working group on counterterrorism. So there's some areas that we're trying to ramp up a little bit more because we have some mutual expertise that we can share to help advance some of these areas. The fifth area that I wanted to touch on is what I referred to as leveraging diversity. It's broad. We are a country of immigration. I touched on some of those stats that you see the traffic increasing both ways, but from India to Canada in particular. And you see what's happening. We've welcomed 29,000 refugees from Syria. The total refugees we'll take in over a period of the past year will be about 50,000. Most of those will be from Syria. It was a commitment our government made. We don't face the same magnitude of challenges that some of our European partners and others do, but we'll do what we can to try to help out. And we do that leveraging and embracing the value that diversity brings to our population, and I think that's something that is very, very important. And that diversity goes beyond culture, language, religion. It's also about gender. We talked about that already. Gender diversity and other forms of non-discrimination that we want to include as part of our society, and that's something that's very, very important here as well. So those are a number of areas. I'm going to focus a little bit more into the trade and economic prosperity. This is an area that, as I said, we've been focusing traditionally quite heavily on, and we will continue to do that. Overall, I mentioned our two-way trade has hit record levels, and I expect that will continue. But at the same time, I still feel that we've only hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of our full potential. You know, Canada's a $2 trillion economy, and India the same. So when you think a little bit about that, $8 billion in two-way trade is not a lot, relatively speaking. So how do we continue to build on that? And we've got good momentum, so we want to continue to do that. There are various sectors that have a lot of potential. Many of them I won't touch on, but just to give you a few examples of some areas. Clean technology, it's something I've already mentioned, renewable energy, solar power plants, hydropower development, which is clean energy, other advanced technologies like fuel cells, biomass, tidal energy. These are areas that we're exploring either actively now or in the research stage here in India. A number of solar investments by companies have resulted in billions of some new energy infrastructure in India, and represent some important partnerships for collaboration as well going forward. Agriculture and agri-food and the whole food security ecosystem, we play a very significant role in that regard. Canada is the largest supplier of imported pulses and an exporter of over 1 million tons of potash from Canada to India on an annual basis. And just to give you an idea, about 40% of all the peas and lentils coming into India come from Canada. And if you include everything that's domestically produced and other imports, almost 10% of all peas and lentils in India are from Canada, which is pretty significant, and not everybody knows that. And there's a good example of something that makes its way to the dining room table of any individual in any village or in a very expensive top-end restaurant. The diversity of that impact is very significant, but it's not widely known. And those numbers are continuing to increase. But that ecosystem is not limited to pulses. We're looking at other areas, agricultural technology. We have an organization called the International Development Research Center. It's a Canadian Crown corporation that's active here on science and technology, working with farmers on how you can increase crop yields, how you can improve water irrigation technology so you can conserve water and increase your yields as well. So that whole technology side. I mentioned potash, so fertilizer is another area where we have a lot in the way of exports from Canada, an opportunity to help the ecosystem here, and that will continue to be an area of ongoing importance. And the whole food chain distribution, cold storage technology to reduce spoilage, logistics and movement of goods are areas that we're focused on with a lot of capacity. Education is another sector that I speak about this not only as the High Commissioner, but also as an area of personal importance. I've already mentioned that there's over the increase in Indian students studying in Canada. That's very important. There's over 100,000 Indian students studying in Canada. The trend is increasing. We're a welcoming environment. We're safe. The cost of studying in Canada is far more competitive than some of our like-mindeds. The quality of the education is world-class, and it's relatively straightforward and easy to get your study permit. And after 2 years of full-time study in a Canadian educational post-secondary institution, you can work in Canada as a student and fast-track for possible immigration as well. So there's a lot to offer on that front. But simply put, for me, education is not just about Indian students studying in Canada. It's about more Canadian students studying here. Even if it's a study tour, a module, a one semester, or a joint academic program, we're trying to do more of that. It's about faculty exchanges and train-the-trainer programs. It's about not just academic, but vocational and technical skills training, where we have a lot of capacity in Canada and a huge amount of need here as well. And it's also about collaboration in academic research, which we're seeing in different fora. We have different programs for that as well. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if that student who studied in Canada or the Canadian student who studied here stays in Canada, come back to India, or is in a third country. Almost always that experience is so positive that that individual student will be an ambassador for the Canada-India relationship for life. Or they'll be in a boardroom about to make a contract decision and they'll think positively of Canada. Or their kids will go to school years from now and they'll say, you should go to Canada because it was great. So the impact of education is far beyond the trade and economic side. It's far greater than that, to a point where you can't measure that. And frankly, I wouldn't be here in this job if it wasn't for education. So you can see I'm very passionate and personally engaged in this area. So let me a couple more areas and then I'll close off. I did want to talk about investment and market access together. And what I mean by that is I touched on some of the increasing trade and investment numbers. But I think the potential is far greater. And there are a couple of tools that we're trying to conclude that some of you have read about in the past or written about. The Foreign Investment Protection Agreement, or here it's called the Bilateral Investment Protection Agreement, the BIPA or the FIPA, is something that is very, very important to us. Providing that stability and predictability, or a mechanism to resolve disputes bilaterally, is very, very critical. And when you talk to our institutional investors, they say that we are committed to the Indian market. We wish we could, or we'd like to be more invested, but we're approaching it in a cautiously optimistic way, because if there is some type of a dispute, it will take potentially a very long time for this to be resolved through the legal system. And having that stability, that predictability, or a mechanism through the FIPA or the BIPA is very, very important. So this continues to be an important priority for Canada, and we're very keen to conclude this. Similarly, what we refer to as the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, a free trade agreement between Canada and India. We've had negotiating rounds for quite a number of years. We're assessing a way forward on how this could be unblocked and concluded in the future. But that has the potential to unleash billions, and this is based on a third-party independent collaborative study, billions in new economic impact for both India and Canada. And so again, it just touches on the fact that while the numbers are good, there's more that can be done, and there's more work that we want to do because we see more optimism going forward. The final area I just wanted to touch on a little bit, and I've already introduced it a little bit, is what I refer to as the people-to-people ties. The strength of the diaspora community, the 1.3 million that I've referred to, is very significant. These individuals, in many cases, are ambassadors just like me for the relationship. Many of these individuals have been very successful in Canada, in business or whatever it might be, and are giving back for development of their villages, remittances, whatever it might be. And it's a very important community which reflects the strength of the relationship and also play a role in helping further advance the relationship. So this is why we do place emphasis on that. And we can understand, and we're appreciative of the government of India's focus on reaching out to diaspora, because it does in fact help advance the bilateral relationship as well. And I think that's an important area that shouldn't go unnoticed as well. To conclude, just looking at the fall, just to give you a bit of a sense, I mentioned our prime ministers have met. They'll be meeting again on the margins of the G20 informally. That's coming up in about a week and a half or so. We also have our Canada's Minister of Natural Resources, which includes, his portfolio includes energy, mines, oil and gas, is going to be visiting in September for what we refer to as an energy dialogue. So during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Canada last year, the relationship was elevated to a strategic partnership. There are only a handful of those that India has and only a handful of those that Canada has. And there are 4 dialogues that underpin that: energy, trade, foreign policy, and finance. The energy dialogue takes place in mid-September. The trade dialogue will take place at the end of September at the ministerial level. And we're firming up dates for the finance and the foreign policy one as well. So this is all happening in the next couple of months. There's a fair bit of discussion. Our foreign ministers will be meeting on the margins of the UN General Assembly. As I mentioned earlier, we're working on dates for a Prime Minister's visit here. So there's quite a bit of momentum in that relationship, building on the success and some of the stats that I've thrown out there. That gives us all reason to be very, very positive and optimistic. So to conclude, the 3 messages that I would simply leave you with would be the relationship is strong, it's robust, and it's on its way to even greater heights. Secondly, there's a lot of success that's been achieved, particularly in the recent couple of years. I've mentioned some of those stats on trade, investment, people-to-people linkages, etc., political relations. But we want to share that success and make it more broadly known because there are 170 other ambassadors out there, and we want to sort of make sure that we are able to showcase what it is that we're doing. And I bet I'm the only one that speaks Gujarati, so that is a start in the right direction. And finally, the 3rd message is, this is only the tip of the iceberg. We have a long way to go, and I'm very, very optimistic on where this relationship is going. Thank you very much, and I look forward to some questions.